Hello, hello. So we're gonna try this out. I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't know if anything's gonna come of it, but we're gonna go for it. So let's see what happens. Basically, anybody that comes in here can request that I read or say something or whatever, I guess. Go from there. Just making sure everything's set up so that it works nice. My audio should be nice and good. Looks like my monitor PC changed IPs again. I really need to set statics, but I am lazy. Both of them did, so that's something. There we go. Okay. Well, of course. Anyways. Yeah, anybody come in here, make a request, do whatever. And there we go. Let's see. Yeah, I really don't have any, specific ideas or anything. I just, everybody keeps saying I should do this, so we're gonna do it, I guess. See. Trying to think of a decent idea of something to read or do or whatever. Let's see what we can get out of this, though. See. Oh, maybe we should read a creepypasta. That'd be different. Have a Herobrine one. Okay. I had recently spawned a new world in single-player Minecraft. Everything was normal at first. I began chopping down trees and crafting a workbench. I noticed something move amongst the dense fog. I have a very slow computer, so I had to play with a tiny render distance. Thought it was a cow, so I pursued it, hoping to grab some hides for armor. It wasn't a cow. Looking back at me was another character with a default skin, but his eyes were empty. I saw no name pop up, and I double checked to make sure I wasn't in multiplayer mode. He didn't stay long. He looked at me and quickly ran into the fog. I pursued out of curiosity, but he was gone. I continued on with the game, not sure what to think. As I expanded the world, I saw that things seemed out of place for the random map generator to make 2x2 tunnels in the rocks. Small, perfect pyramids made of sand in the ocean, and groves of trees with all their leaves cut off. I would constantly think I saw the other player in the deep fog, but I never got a better look at him. I tried increasing my render distance to far whenever I thought I saw him, but it was to no avail. I saved the map and went onto the forums to see if anybody... Yeah, I gotta change some settings. I don't have anything set up right. I don't remember what it was. There you go. Special. Anyways. I saved the map. Hello. How's it going, Fox? I saved the map and went onto the forums to see if anybody... Oh, great. Okay. To see if anybody else had found the pseudo player. There was none. I created my own topic, telling of the man and asking if anyone had similar experience. The post was deleted within 5 minutes. I tried again, and the topic was deleted even faster. I received a PM from user Herobrine. Thanks. This website has... Why does Creepypasta's website have so many ads? Thanks. I received a PM from the username Herobrine containing one word. Stop. When I went to look at Herobrine's profile, the page 404'd, I received an email from another user. Thanks for the follow. He claimed the mods can read the forum user message, so we're safer using email. The emailer claimed that he had seen the mysterious player too, and had a small directory of other users who had seen him as well. Their worlds were littered with obvious man-made features as well, and described the mysterious player to have no pupils. Hey, what's up, Wrath? About a month passed until I heard from my informant again. Some of the people who had encountered this mysterious man had looked into the name Herobrine and found that name to be frequently used by a Swedish gamer. After some further information gathering, it was revealed to be the brother of Notch, the game's developer. I recently emailed Notch and asked him if he had a brother. It took him a while, but he emailed back a very short message. I did, but he is no longer with us. Notch. I haven't seen the mysterious man since our first encounter, and I haven't noticed any changes to the world other than my own. I was able to press print screen when I first saw him. Here's the only evidence of his existence. What's up, Kange? Well, that was a short one. What else? What other top ranked ones are there? Famous ones or whatever. I'm all for recommendations, Fox or Kange. That G Fuel out though. Let's go back to an original. $19.99. written by Camden Lamont. In a cellar somewhere, standing before the camera, a man in a tatty, moth-eaten bear suit says hello to a small handful of watching children. Yeah, thanks. This is a public access show viewed by only a small number of fans. A small number that includes you. As a child, you love Mr. Bear. You don't care they broadcast from a cellar, that there's something remarkably dark about the way those polished button eyes stare back into the camera lens. As a child, you don't see those things. When Mr. Bear suggests you write him, you jump to the chance. When he writes back, asking you to visit him, you jump at the chance too. As a child, there are some things you just don't see. You don't see the man beneath the bear suit, or that the bear's teeth and claws. As a child, there are some things you just don't see. And of course, some things that you aren't supposed to. 1999. The year is 1999. That sentence brings me back to my senior kindergarten class when I was 5 years old. Yeah, probably. I mean, all these get exported at some point, so. Where we used to read out the data on the blackboard every single day. The year 1999 exists as a stain in my mind. However, as a memory that will not go any away, no matter how hard I try to forget it. 1999 marked the year I lost my first tooth. My first time on a plane, and unfortunately, the early loss of my childhood innocence. Also, okay. There's that. That one memory that refused to be wiped. It all started with that new or old TV. At that time, Pokemon wasn't the latest fad to hit the school. Pokemon cards, games, stickers, and the most popular, the TV show. So, of course, every time I came home from school, I would stay glued to the TV until Pokemon came on at 5. The only problem was that my dad watched the news at 5:30, and Pokemon episodes were back to back, which meant I had to miss an episode every day, something I whined on and on about. My dad got tired of hearing me complain every day. That must be why he went and bought another TV. My dad put the TV he bought in my room. Unfortunately, it was just an old, small boob tube, with rabbit ears even. It also only had 20 channels available, not included the channel Pokemon was on. I recall I didn't care though. I was just thrilled I had my own TV in my room. Although surfing the channels, I came to the conclusion that only Channel 2, TVO Kids, was worth watching. So I watched that for a while. It wasn't until another few months I discovered Channel 21. One day in April, I was flipping through channels, trying to see if Pokemon was on. I pressed Channel 21 into the remote, hoping there were more channels, and to my delight, there was. My dad was surprised too, but he let me watch it because it seemed to have kids programs on it. The channel was called Caledon Local 21, and later I found out that it was indeed broadcast from the town of Caledon, Ontario, a town very close to my city. The shows I saw on Caledon Local 21 looked poorly made, and I never understood what was going on half the time. However, as I grew up, every time I thought of that channel, I realized more and more how messed up the shows were, and I had to ask myself, what the fuck was I watching? The following list of shows and episodes I remember seeing on Caledon Local 21. How I remember such detail even disturbs me, but I guess things like that stand out in your mind for a while. The channel only ran a few shows, probably because it was only operable between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. Mr. Bear's Cellar, Episode 12. Very sketchy name if you were to look at it nowadays. The show featured a guy wearing a bear mascot costume who would get a new visitor into his cellar every day. It was always a kid. The show was filmed with a camcorder, and not a very good one either. The police asked me a lot of questions about this show. The episode started with Mr. Bear sitting at a table playing checkers by himself. He sat there playing for a bit until there was a knock at the door. The camera was then looking up the stairs at the door. There was another knock. Mr. Bear climbed the stairs and opened the door to reveal two young children. One was a boy about my age, and the other was a girl who looked about 8. Mr. Bear danced in delight and then started talking to the kids. I couldn't hear any of them that well. I remembered Mr. Bear then led the kids into the cellar, which was quite dark, only lit by a small oil lamp on the table. I can't really remember much more, except him singing a song, which I couldn't hear too well either, probably because of that large bear mask. The episode ending with them playing hide and seek, with the kids hiding in a closet and Mr. Bear counting. May 1999. Soup and Spoon. I don't think this was even a show. I think it was more of a special movie thing. All I know is I stopped watching Caledon Local 21 for a while because I thought this show was too stupid. Especially since Pokemon now came on at 4:30 and 5. I don't remember much of this, but it showed a can of soup and a spoon, both attached to strings, swinging back and forth, as if somebody was holding them, dangling them in front of the camera. Interestingly enough, the show was shot in a basement, which just looked like the one used in Mr. Bear's cellar. Like I said, I can't remember much. The only thing I remember clearly was the end. The entire thing was only half an hour, and just included stuff I found stupid, such as the spoon chasing the soup around, trying to eat him. The ending showed a table, about 7 kids sitting around it, each with a bowl of soup in front of them. They were sitting and looking at the camera, but with confused, almost frightened faces. The cameraman then held the can of soup in front of the kids and said, "Spoon's ready," and it just stopped. July 1990. It was summer, and I hadn't watched Channel 21 for a while, until one day I slept over at my friend's house. No, no I don't. I have not gotten anything set up, Dan. I mean, the base one should be there, but that's about it. It was summer, and I hadn't watched Channel 21 for a while, until one day when I slept over at my friend's house, and I decided to check it out again. I have no idea what that is. But thanks, I think. My friend had gotten a TV in his room. You don't know who Pokemon is? I at least know who that is. That's more from Minecraft, though, but I mean, I mostly know it from like YouTube videos and Twitch, basically, or Twitter or TikTok. My friend had gotten a TV in his room for his 6th birthday, so we stayed up very late. For us, 9:30 was very late, and watched TV. That's when I remembered Channel 21 and brought it up to my friend. We decided to see if it was on, and to our surprise, it was. It must have changed broadcasting time. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 23. The episode was entertaining for my friend and me, mainly because it had swearing. However, now, when I think of this episode, I realized something was definitely wrong when it was filmed. The episode started with a camera on its side, while it was facing Mr. Bear, who was walking upstairs to the cellar door. The camera then blacked out for a second, before fading in, back upright and facing Mr. Bear. There was also another kid talking to him, but this kid looked about 11 or 12. He was talking to Mr. Bear for a while, but I couldn't hear well. Again with the crappy camcorder. Until the kid started raising his voice. The kid was saying how it was late, and his sister had to go home. You could also hear more voices in the background. I remember Mr. Bear clearly saying, "Get the fuck out, you're not invited," with a deep voice muffled by the bear mask. I remembered my friend and I looking at each other, laughing at the mention of the forbidden F word. But the episode got weirder. The kid began climbing the stairs before turning around and saying how he was going to call the police. Mr. Bear began breaking into a run towards the kid, who started screaming and running as well. The camcorder then cut out, and that was the end of the episode. The channel then turned to static shortly after. August 1999. I didn't want to watch Channel 121 after that. In August, I grew more curious to see Mr. Bear's Cellar for some reason, though. Last episode I saw of Mr. Bear was weird and had swearing. It also made me think the show was meant for teenagers. Nonetheless, I flipped to Channel 21 when my dad was busy. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 28. Apparently, this episode had been playing the entire month of August. It was studied a lot by the police. The entire episode was Mr. Bear sitting in a chair, talking to the audience. "Hello, kids. Do you want to come visit my cellar? If you do, please write me a letter at this address." The screen then switched to widescreen with multicolored letters reading the address. And that was the remnant of the rest of the episode. This repeated for 5 hours every day until September came. Guess what I actually did? I sent Mr. Bear, or that sick bastard who portrayed him, a letter. I did it out of curiosity mostly. My dad was okay with it because he thought it was a legitimate kid show. But then again, he never saw any of what was on Channel 21. So I wrote a letter using my best writing possible. I think I just said how I wanted to meet Mr. Bear. So my dad sent the letter to the address Mr. Bear said on the show. It stayed on all day. Anyway, for some reason. It took about a week to get a response, which I was surprised it did. I still have the letter I received on August 15th, 1999. The letter reads, Dear Elliot, thank you ever so much for your letter. I would love to have you in my cellar. We play games, watch movies, and go fire camping in the middle of the woods. Come to my house at, please cut out this address, Calden, Ontario, Canada. I look very forward to having fun with you. Love, Mr. Bear. I cannot believe my dad never found this sketchy, because he actually took me to the house. That's when the police came involved. Those endless questions. Those pictures of terrified kids in the wood. That brings me to why I'm writing this blog. That psycho and his friends did some fucked up shit back then. And now, it seems he's trying to get into contact with me again. The entire police thing is coming back. It has brought 1999 back to me over a decade later. This is happening again. Update, November 14th, 2009. People have been emailing me asking exactly what happened in 1999. I will get to that. Those weird TV shows I was watching apparently were meant to attract kids to Mr. Bear's house. What Mr. Bear did shocked the entire town. My dad actually drove me to Calden along with the address Mr. Bear left in the letter. The house was on the outskirts of town in the open farmland. I still remember that house. It looked like an older farmhouse. It looked to have been built in the early 1900s. The windows were all boarded up, and the house looked in a state of disrepair. As we walked up the house, I remember my dad checking the address over and over again, and looking at the house in disbelief. Then the door opened. I expected Mr. Bear to be at the door, but I was surprised to see a police officer emerge from the creaking doorway. The officer began talking to my dad while I was quickly asked if that was Mr. Bear's house. The officer's face cringed slightly, and he muttered, "Oh God," or something like that. He started talking quietly to my dad, so I couldn't hear. Although my dad told me to go to the car anyways. And then we just went home. My dad was quiet the whole way home. I felt something strange had happened. My dad never told me what happened for a while. I forgot about it anyways, too. Channel 21 no longer came on, and when I asked about it, my dad would not acknowledge its existence. I think it was when I was 13 where I learned the truth. I remember Channel 21 one day and asked my dad about it. I guess he finally decided I should hear the truth. Calden Local 21 was a local TV channel that ran from October 1997 to August 1999 in the Peel region of Ontario. The entire channel was made from a house in Caledon, the one I visited, and ran by a man who was not really known to be anyone in the town. The channel was only available to older TVs because the signal was one only picked up by rabbit ears, the weaker frequencies. The man created all the shows on the channel, all of which were kid shows. He was Mr. Bear, and he was a mysterious cameraman. The real reason he created the channel was more disturbing than was originally thought. As you might have already guessed, he kidnapped kids and held them in his cellar. But while most people thought he was a serial child molester, he really wanted to use the kids for another purpose. The day I arrived, the man had fled his house the night before, the day before the police went in for their investigation. I wasn't the only one who was watching. Update, December 2nd, 2009. Okay. Sorry for not answering any questions for so long. I haven't accessed my email account for some time. Anyway, let me finally set those things straight about what I know. Back in October, I visited the house previously known by the man who ran Caledon Local 21. 2 women lived there, operating a daycare business. How ironic. Hey, what's up, man? How's it going? Now to answer the questions you guys emailed me. Who else watched Channel 21? I know other people watched it for sure, including the kids who wound up at Mr. Bear's house. After some Google searches, I found a few people on the NeoSeeker forums who were discussing the show from Caledon Local 21. They talked about the 2 shows I watched, but also 2 shows I had never seen before. Go for it. A user named I Am Real Life seemed to know all the shows that were broadcast on Channel 21. Nothing like super specific or crazy, I guess. Here are the 2 shows I've never heard of. Fallen Angel in Life. I Am Real Life described as a fairly boring show about a guy rambling on and on in front of the camera about how we must put Satan and appease him before it was too late. Paint with the Soul. I Am Real Life and another user called Siggy92 were discussing the show. They described it as Blair Witch-like, as it consisted of the cameraman wandering around the forest at night, doing nothing particularly interesting. I'll go looking for the conversation and see if I can get the link. Where is Mr. Bear? Or the guy who wore the costume? If I did know, I would have said earlier. I have no idea where this guy is, or if he's dead, or alive. Hopefully dead. When I see my dad's friend next time, I'll ask him about this. Maybe I can get more definite answer. What did Mr. Bear do to the children? This is by far the most common question I've been asked. Found out this in October as well by my dad's friend, who is a retired Caledon regional officer. Apparently, the man playing Mr. Bear took the kids out of the house into the forest nearby. What he did there, police are not exactly sure how it happened, but 16 charred bodies of children between the ages of 4 and 13 did not want to go into the exact details, but I am seeing him next time. Thursday anyways, so maybe I can extort more information from them there. That's all I have for now. Thanks for keeping interest in my blog. I will try to gather as much information as I can in the next post. I've actually been getting pretty interested in this myself. It should be in my right to know what happened. I'll be right back. Let's see. What else should we read? Or talk about? Or do? Whatever. Just use the random story button. That sounds fun. Okay. We have The Starry Crown, written by Mark E. Fitch. What left the university campus behind to do fieldwork in the deep south. I was studying folk songs from the southern states that had neither a time or place of origin, nor a known composer. Those old songs that just seemed to rise out of the culture, folklore, and evangelical mysticism, like steam rising from a swamp. Songs that had been sung for generations by slaves and slave owners, Baptist ministers, and backwood preachers, and whose chords have been struck by banjos and whistled on whiskey jugs. Those songs presented a mystery to me, one that seemed to be known and understood in the Deep South, but eluded by myself and others in the halls of academia. In particular, I was seeking the origins of the beautiful ode in which the singer calls for all brothers and sisters, mothers and sinners, to go down to the river to pray. Of most interest was a variation in the lyrics that I could not understand given its Judo-Christian origins. Use in one line of the term starry crown. As I went down to the river to pray, studying about the good old way, and who should wear the starry crown. More versions of the hymn use the words thorny crown to reference Christ's crown of thorns during the crucifixion. These lyrics would appear to make the most sense in the context of the song, so the use of starry crown in the older and possibly more genuine versions of this hymn was a puzzle. Secondly, the term presents a question of who should wear the crown. If this were a Christian hymn, that question would never be asked. Christ would wear the thorny crown one, and whom would presume any crown. So the line presents a second mystery as to why and how someone other than Christ would be picked to wear a starry crown, and for what purpose. I could find no relevant biblical references to a starry crown that made sense in the context of baptism. Thus, I was left with a mystery as to what its original meaning was and why it had changed. In the earliest versions of the song, published in 1867 by G.H. Allen in his Slave Song of the United States, but in his personal diary writings, Allen referenced an earlier heterophore unknown version of the song, recorded on paper by Llewellyn Cobb. Allen wrote that Cobb had mailed him the song in order that he might include it in slave songs, but that the version was somewhat unbalanced, and he made changes to the music. Cobb had lived in that southern stronghold of South Carolina long before the Reconstruction and interest in slavery's subculture developed. I traveled to that state, driving to Evanstown, where Cobb had lived. I found residence in an old plantation home turned into a bed and breakfast. Ashcroft Manor, named after the aristocrat family that built and ran the plantation. It was an effort to immerse myself in the antebellum culture, thinking that perhaps the scenery and living situation would stir my mind to new connections and insights into this era so far removed from modern life. The proprietors, Ted and Mary Wallstone, were an elderly couple who had prided themselves on keeping the plantation as close to its original form as possible. We finally sprung for indoor plumbing in the 80s, Ted told me. Can't tell how much business we lost before that because of the outhouses. But I just didn't want to change this structure, putting holes in the walls and everything. To me, it would have been like desecrating a church, you know. I nodded in agreement, but his relaxation of a slave plantation to a church. The Remy, wistful look in his eyes left me feeling unsettled. I told him of my research project, leaving out the specific mystery of the Starry Crown, but hopeful that he could provide some direction in this unfamiliar place. Ah, that's a beautiful old hymn, Ted said. My God, it stays with you, doesn't it? It was first written on paper right here in this area, I told him. He reflected for a moment. Doesn't surprise me. Do you remember when you first heard the song? As a child, many years ago, of course. Back then, most people called it Down to the Valley, not the good old way. I'd read this previously. There were several names and incarnations. The good old way was the most historically prevalent, which only deepened the mystery. I thought this was related to baptism, so it makes sense going down to the river, like it says in the song. But why would they go down to a valley and pray? He raised his eyebrows at me. Well, most rivers are in valleys, city boy. And, of course, there's still river baptisms here. First Sunday of every month, he said proudly. Where are they held? I'd like to witness one. Well, the Green River is the most congregationated to go, but there are a lot of other creeks and rivers around here, too. And plenty of smaller congregations that use them for their own services. So it could be anywhere, but the Green River is probably the best bet. I thanked Ted for his time and hospitality. He wished me luck on my search, but left me with a bit of advice. Careful who you question around here. People in these parts are very private. They hold their beliefs sacred and can be pretty suspicious when outsiders come asking questions, even if it's about an old song. He patted me on the shoulder and went about his business, maintaining a home that had previously been the site of the horrendous rites of slavery. I slept badly that night. There were ghosts in the air. Finding a Baptist church in the South is not a challenge. Rather, the challenge was finding where to start. One could throw a rock and hit a Baptist church, and the rock would bounce off that church and hit another one right next door. On nearly every stretch of road and corner, there stood a large white building with a steeple, a converted warehouse with a Christ-proclaiming sign, or some old, tiny schoolhouse that reached back into the days of colonies, but now proclaimed pancake breakfast and Bible studies on Wednesday. I began to survey each of them, explaining my project and inquiring as to their river baptismal services. The pastors and reverends were helpful and willing. Naturally, they all knew of the song, but very few could point me in any direction as to its origin or meaning. Most said it was a baptismal hymn, but there was not mention of an actual baptism in the verses. Just going down to the river or valley and pondering who should wear a starry crown. Reverends grew more silent when I mentioned the starry crown aspect of the mystery. None of them, for all their theology, can give me an adequate explanation as to the meaning of those words, and what biblical reference it came from. I spent several days in city halls, file cabinets of records, searching churches, Lillowin's Cobb's residence 150 years ago. His home wasn't in the town, but in the surrounding hills that had once been cultivated with crops harvested by slaves. An elderly woman at the clerk's desk, a withered crown with fake teeth, the long, drawn-out manner of a former Southern belle, asked what I was searching for, and I gave her a brief summary. "You should go see Thomas Jerry over at Perf Dafters," she said. "I feel like I've been to every church in the state at this point," I replied with a smile. "Not this one," she said. "Thomas is 101 years old. His parents were children when freed after the Civil War, and his family lived in these parts ever since. You could probably tell you something about this story." "Where can I find him?" "Not around here. You have to go into the hills. First Baptist is the oldest church in this area. It's only the size of this here room. Not like all those big churches. The size of airports that keep springing up. But they have the most wonderful choir. You should hear them sing at night. You hear it all through the hills. It's like hearing a lullaby sung by God." Her eyes appeared to wane and turn into the deepest sockets of her furrowed visage, and she fell silent. She was smiling, but not at me. I turned to look, but there was nothing else around. Fearing that she was suffering a stroke or something mildly, I cautiously asked if she wasn't feeling well. She did not speak, but, standing before me, the old crone began humming a tune, something vaguely familiar, which I could not place exactly. Perhaps a gloomy bastardization of a song I knew. "What is that song?" I asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, her humming grew louder, as if trying to drown out my voice. Her eyes vacantly stared beyond. My skin started crawling. It felt as if there was something else in the room with us, which only she could see, and it was reaching its tentacles up over my shoulder, treading lightly on the skin of my back. I left her standing there, unsure if she was in some kind of mystic or suffering an onset of dementia. But later, either way, the creepy sensation was overwhelming me to the point of panic. The sound of her humming voice was stirring in my head like a rising cry of locusts. I hurried out of the humid heat of the southern summer, breathing deep and heavy. The air like smoke in my lungs, the city abandoned and lonely in the pastel light of day. I turned left and right, spun myself around looking for any sign of life, till I was nearly dizzy. A single dark sedan rolled down the street and stopped at a traffic light in front of me. I could see my features in the tinted windows distorted and twisted into some kind of monstrous being. The window rolled down, and a wizened face scowled at me from the back seat. His face seemed abnormally long and cut deep lines with folded mesh. His staring eyes were hazy with cataracts. A pungent smell wafted from the open window, and I stumbled away from the car. The old man continued to stare at me. The darkness window rolled back up, and the sedan pulled away from the sidewalk. I was distorted and exhausted. The feeling from all the hall of records stayed with me into the evening, as I retreated back into the bed and breakfast. Ashcroft Manor was filled to capacity. Elderly men and women mingled in dining rooms. They spilled out into the back patio, which each looked out on a field of grass and dark trees in the distance. I figured them for tourists, but they seemed so familiar with Ted and Mary. The proprietors mingled with the guests like old friends. They had not seen each other in ages. They were all finely dressed, glasses of wine in their hands, laughing and murmuring in the deep dusk. The kaleidoscope of my delirium continued. The room seemed to spin. Ted placed a hand on my shoulder, and I told that I thought I was too much sun. The other guest turned to stare at me. The hell are you doing? That's special, I guess. Making a pyramid or something. I forgot about that. The other guest turned and stared at me, light glinting off pearl necklaces and dangling bracelets. I saw a dress made of stars. It hung loosely and breezy from the shoulders with skin tanned like leather. Beautiful music poured into my mind. Ted escorted me to my room. When I woke the following morning, the estate was empty, and the other guest, Mary, brought ice water to my room and politely suggested that maybe the climate was not suited for me. I conceded that I had been in quite a state. I don't know what came over with me. Seems like you've been working quite a lot, she said. Southern heat can do that to a man who isn't accustomed to it. I asked her where all the others had gone, and she told me I had walked in on one of their monthly gatherings. We belonged to a small social club, she said. True Southern society still exists, you know. Then I asked her about First Baptist and the clerk at the Hall of Records. Oh, she laughed quietly to herself. That's just Ethel. She's a little touched in the head at her old age. Instead, I located Lilo and Cobb's home, considering a minor historical site, and maintained by a small town historical society. It had also been recently the site of a murder investigation. The body of a young black male was found in the house several months post-mortem by some hikers. The investigation was pending, and despite the turn of events in my research, I decided I should visit Walker's home. I followed the GPS map in my rental car out into the hills beyond Evanstown, amongst winding roads, deep bluffs, shadows, and liquid light. Everywhere were creeks and rivers. The GPS became useless as the roads turned to dirt pathways. My rented Grand Am scraped its side mirrors against the thickening underbrush. I was forced to stop the car and continue on by foot, finding a small sign pointing towards a historical site. That was getting annoying. Cobb's ancient cabin appeared, as if manifested by magic from the underbrush. The forest had started to reclaim it, and any historical society that claimed to care for the property was severely negligent. The old old southern shack listed to one side, and brambles covered its eastern wall. The front entrance was cordoned off by yellow police tape, much of which had come unmoored and snaked through the underbrush. I climbed into the front porch and passed through the entrance, noting a plaque that gave a brief biography of Lillian Cobb, a largely forgotten artist and composer. Inside was dank and dark, and haunted with the smell of old meat. There was a pot-bellied stove in the living room, remnants of the furniture and sleeping arrangements on the floor. An old mattress stained with blood, and putrens, and tattered blankets. I made my way through each room, trying to envision the life that Cobb had within these walls, confines, with only candlelight keeping the darkness at bay, and the freezing winters huddled by the stove, fear of illness and crop shortages, loneliness at the point of insanity in the brambled forests of the South Carolina mountains. I tried to picture him running the hymns from his book over and over in his mind as he scratched out the notes on a paper. Who should wear the starry crown? In a small anteroom near the back of the homestead, there was a writing desk beside a single pane glass window that looked out into the forest hillside sloping away from the house. I sat there for a moment in the rickety chair, worn weak by age, and in the light that came through the portal, I saw strange decorations made of sticks, hung by twine from the wooden ceiling. They turned and twisted in the gravitational vortex of the earth. Forest sticks cobbled together like stars and hung from strings like something a child might fashion in school. The smell of gore wafted from the living room, a warm, wet breeze. I spoke to the empty room in a moment of uncharacteristic theatrics. So did you see the stars, my friend? I walked back onto the small front porch and looked over the sloping hills. There was no river to be seen. I avoided the hall of records, still frightened from the vertigo that had sent in the other day, and by the haunting, elderly clerk. I asked Ted about First Baptist, and he replied, yes, out in the hills. Old place, but they haven't held service since 15. The old bat at the clerk's office must finally be losing her marbles. Can you tell me where in the hills? I'd like to see it. Maybe get a picture or two. I wouldn't even know how to get out there, son. Trust me, there ain't nothing out there that could do you much good. So instead, I conducted an old-fashioned search through the internet for Thomas Jerry. I found a listing that matched the description the town clerk had given me. There wasn't too many Thomas Jerrys that were 101 years old. He was located way off the beaten path and looked to be a trailer park. I made a phone call, but the line was disconnected. I made the drive instead.